All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started if everyone can get seated. So thank you for coming. The meeting of the Faculty Senate will come to order. Welcome. For our colleagues connecting at a distance, please begin your response with Potomac State or WVU Tech. And like we did last time, we have a mechanism for you to indicate if you have any questions, and I'll be trying to pay attention for that. So we need to do a roll call, starting with Potomac State. Potomac State, how many are present?
Potomac State, 2.
Okay. And at WVU Tech, how many are present?
WVU Tech has 3 senators present.
Okay. All right. And joining me up here is Dave Hauser. He is acting as the parliamentarian and secretary today. So our next agenda item is the minutes of the October 2nd Faculty Senate meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed as an annex to your agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the October meeting? And Potomac State and Tech, flash up a yes if you have any additions or corrections. Okay, hearing no corrections or additions, the minutes are approved as written. And our next item is a for information report from Vice Provost John Campbell.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, come on. I get my one chance to be out here in front of all of you, and that's all I get? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. All right. I can be easily amused and happy. I love it. Anyway, so unfortunately, President Gee and Provost McConnell couldn't be here. They're both at the APLU meeting in Washington, D.C. Actually, I think Gordon is presenting right now at the meeting. I have a number of things in terms of an update. So first, again, my regular reminder about our HLC accreditation coming up on March 5th and 6th. You should have received information from your dean and department chairs around the faculty credentials and the need to collect transcripts. Again, this was something that's been in place with the HLC for actually a number of years, but has become more recently enforced by the Higher Learning Commission. And so if you haven't received any information or don't feel like you have enough, just come and ping me at the end of the Senate meeting, and we'll make sure that the information gets out and available to everybody. The hot topic this past week seems to be our federal government and the Tax Cut and Job Act, which has a number of provisions as it relates to our institution, particularly graduate students. I would say that we're still early in the process, and here's what we know today, subject to change to a tweet or something else later this afternoon. The act is currently in the House and is, based on everything that we know, likely to pass as is, and then we'll be going to the Senate. The Senate has a number of differences compared to the House bill. So in terms of the key provisions within this act, one is taxing graduate tuition waivers. That's a big piece in the House. It has concerned a number of our graduate students. It is not currently in the Senate bill as it stands. The removal of the deduction for student loan interest, again in the House version, not in the Senate version. Taxing on the university foundation, as it stands right now, we don't have enough money in our foundation. We're not in that top tier, so will not really apply to WVU. Taxation on nonprofit institutions and debt would have an impact on our hospital system, but not necessarily on the institution as a state agency. Also looking at employer-related tuition discounts, again in the House, not in the Senate. So there's a lot of pieces in place. Our governmental relations folks are in touch regularly with our state representatives and working with them to get a kind of, to understand our perspective on each of these issues, plus others. And so we'll keep you informed as it develops. And so we'll work with that as it happens. A few other things happening around. One is around winter term. As you may be aware, we're doing a winter term in December into the beginning of January. We initially selected 11 courses, 255 seats. As of lunch today, we had 288 students. We actually opened up a couple more sections that filled up in less than 2 weeks. And so that pilot project is proceeding and going along well. We have participants from each of the campuses as part of that, so that's good news. The state revenue secretary, Dave Hardy, last week announced that as of this point, they don't anticipate the state doing any mid-year budget cuts. And so the state gap between projected and actual is about $8 million. As of last week, a year ago, it was closer to $90 million. So they're getting a lot closer with the projections. And so we see that as a very positive sign. Won't make any guarantees, but that again is a very positive sign. The other thing with last week, we had our first day of giving. Thanks to everyone that participated, either through your Facebook posts, tweets, emails, and such. WVU raised about $2.9 million in the day of giving last Wednesday through over about 2,500 gifts. And so a big thank you to everyone that has participated with that. Other items. Love to brag about our students. Garrett Burgess, yes, Lisa, one of your students, I believe, has been named a finalist for a Marshall Scholarship. The Marshall offers up to 40 scholarships of students with high ability to study graduate school in the UK. And so that's very excited. Garrett's a senior from Elkview in Russian Studies and Political Science. And so we were excited to hear about that, and that's great news. Also, we have a semifinalist for the Schwartzman Scholarship, Colin Lopez. The program is designed to prepare global leaders through a one-year master's program at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I hope I got that correct in terms of pronunciation. Lopez graduated in May with a degree in international studies, is currently preparing to go to Amman, Jordan with a Fulbright scholarship. And so very excited for both of these students and what they may accomplish. Two other final things. One is you should have seen a note today, I believe, from the provost office seeking out long-form scholarship from the past year. We've started promoting and recognizing faculty and staff that have received a book, a CD, full-length work, in another medium such as art, theater. So if you have produced such a work, we are encouraging people to submit your work by Friday, December 1. So we have a couple weeks here going. And then finally, this group has asked about a year ago in terms of displaying a preferred first name. And we had a number of systems that we had outlined. And tomorrow, the preferred first name will show up in eCampus. So again, we continue to work along that list that it's been requested, and we'll continue to do that. So with that, is there any questions from the audience, or? Yes, ma'am.
Use the microphone.
Oh.
I'm just wondering if this new contract with China for $85 or $89 billion affects the university in any way.
Sure. I'd like to say it's all coming to the university. No. So last Thursday it was announced that there was a memorandum of understanding signed for $84 billion over the next 20 years in energy development in the state of West Virginia. This actually came out of some work done through the Energy Institute. So we've been working with institutions in China, including this particular group, in research such as coal gasification and other energy-related matters. So that was how the bridge was formed, and worked with the state to make that happen. Most of that $84 billion is going towards actually infrastructure development, everything from storage of natural gas, fine chemical development, energy development, and a development of a number of infrastructure components. We also anticipate that our ongoing research relationship will continue to grow. So I think this is a great advantage in terms of, one, putting people in the state to work, also continuing to build that relationship with the company on research interest, and finally, offering a place for our students to work in West Virginia as they graduate. And so I think there'll be a number of key areas there. But thank you. Other questions from here? How about Potomac State or Tech? No questions. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And again, the provost and president are at APLU, which is the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, and they could not make it today. This is my chair report. One piece of business I failed to report, we do have a quorum today. And I did want to give you an update on a few things that we've been talking about in recent meetings. One is in the area of Board of Governor rules. So as you remember, we're in a position where we have to revise all the current Board of Governor rules, or they're currently called policies, and replace the policies with rules. And we're most interested in this in the Senate with the rules that deal with faculty issues and academic issues. So there are working groups going on in each of these areas, faculty and academic issues. In the area of faculty issues, the group's been meeting every Friday. I'm a member of it. It's been led by C.B. Wilson. At this point, I think it's fair to say we have a first draft of all of our rules as they pertain to faculty-related issues, and they're ready to move forward. The next step is to go to the University Planning Committee and the Faculty Exec Committee. There were actually some campus conversations. I announced them. We announced them in the last meeting. They weren't really very well attended, so there are 3 campus conversations here in Morgantown, and a total of 10 people went to it, although there were quite a few that participated online. With respect to the branch campuses, CB visited Potomac State, was it last week? And then he plans on going to Tech next week. So if you're at Tech, you have an opportunity. And you actually got a better fraction of people participating at Potomac State, and his visit at Tech is tomorrow. Okay. So in terms of what we're doing moving forward and with the faculty policies, they're going to go to Faculty Senate Exec. We'll have an opportunity to comment on them there. And then we want to bring them to the Board of Governors to the February 16th meeting. If the schedule slips, we might have to have a special meeting of the Board of Governors in March. Now you'll notice I didn't mention any specific comment period for the Senate. And of course, as senators, you had an opportunity to comment previously during the campus conversations. What we plan on doing is having, I think CB is going to come and give a presentation to the full Senate probably in January. And then when the rules are presented to the Board of Governors, that begins a period of rulemaking, 30-day period. And so if you have some comments that you would like to submit, you can do so. You just go to the webpage and you can type them in. And hopefully everything will be ready and it'll be approved pending any revisions that need to be made in light of the public comment period, but approved at the April 20th meeting. And again, these changes, we don't really intend on changing things very much. A lot of it is a reformatting, getting things out of the language of policies and making them rules, removing reference to the HEPC and things like that. And then the second area is in the area of academic policy, and there's been a separate working group in that area, including myself and Ralph Utzman. There's a working group that's being led by Paul Kreider, and then his working group is providing input to what we're calling, for lack of a shorter name, the Faculty Senate Exec Ad Hoc Academic Policy Review Committee. And it's a subset of the Exec Committee that's going over the rules and policies that have been provided by Paul Kreider. And so far, we've looked at policies related to attendance, transient transfers, incompletes and withdrawals, and program definitions. And then we plan on meeting again to go over some further rules and policies. So I think that set is maybe a little bit further behind in terms of when we'll see it here at the Senate and at the Board of Governors. I think the intent is to get it to the April 20th Board of Governors meeting for a first reading and then approval at the June 22nd meeting. So by June 22nd, then, all of the policies at that point would have been revised and then turned into rules, okay? Another thing I wanted to give an update on, the Faculty Senate Exec Committee has been working with Staff Council to develop a unified set of requests to the state legislation. So this is just a set of bullet points that we can put into a flyer to let the legislation know what is most important to us at the university, including all campuses. And there's the obvious elephant in the room, which is the budget. And of course, we have some bullet points on the budget. But the other area that I think is going to become an issue in the state legislation, as I understand it, is the issue of campus carry. And so, but what I mean by that is, the ability to carry a firearm on campus. And, there have been some bills through the years that have been before the legislation. They've always been defeated. But we think that the NRA this year has some support to maybe get something through. So we do want to make sure that the legislature understands, whatever concerns we might have. And, we could debate this on the dimensions of safety and freedom and things like that. But I think really what would resonate most with the state legislature is to point to what the costs would be of campus carry. Because, one version of the bill would say, well, you can exclude firearms from certain parts of campus, but if you do that, you need to have security, screening, and storage, okay? And to do that, there's obviously a cost. And we've talked to some of our other peer schools that have implemented campus carry, and the best estimate we can come up with is maybe about $3 million a year to comply. So with that in mind, the full set of bullet points that the Faculty Senate Exec Committee and the Staff Council came up with are as follows, and I'm just quoting. We asked that our legislation appreciate the importance of higher education on the future of the state and oppose further cuts to WVU's budget. Consider the full impact of campus carry, including the costs of compliance and the potential loss in recruitment and retention of students, faculty, and staff. Provide adequate and affordable health care options to the employees of WVU. Continue to support the comprehensive health care mission of WVU's Health Sciences Center through the 1-cent pop tax. So these will all go into a flyer then that's distributed to the legislation. And notice when it's talking about health care, we did not put in the letters PEIA. So we just want good health care, and it doesn't necessarily have to be PEIA. Okay, and if I get a little off script, it's because I spilled water on the agenda. So so we may need to improvise a little here. Okay, finally, I do like to announce events, and there's actually two competing events going on tonight. And so the first one is WVU Cancer Institute is hosting the annual Pink Party. It's tonight at Touchdown Terrace in Milan Pushkar Stadium. Program runs from 6 to 9 p.m. Tickets are still available, purchased at the door for $95 each, but all proceeds go to support Bonnie's Bus, and there will be tours of Bonnie's Bus available there. And the other one is that also at 6 p.m., there's going to be music to commemorate the 1917 Russian Revolution. So there'll be two violin pieces performed. One is Russian and the other is Soviet, and C.B. Wilson will be there to provide some commentary. So that's tonight at 6 p.m., locations B51 Whitehall, and it's open to the public and free, yes. But if you're wondering what I'm doing tonight, maybe my tie might give away which of the two I've decided to go to. Okay, so that's all I had for today. Are there any questions of me? Potomac State or Tech, do you have questions for me? Okay, thanks. And then I think we'll move on. I believe our next agenda item is a report from athletics. And this is Kelly Zinn and Shane Lyons.
Well, thank you very much. Kelly's going to load this up. As he said, my name's Shane Lyons, Director of Athletics and Associate Vice President, along with Kelly Zinn, who is our Deputy Athletics Director. A little bit about both of our backgrounds. We are born and raised in West Virginia. Both of us received our undergraduate and graduate degrees here at West Virginia. I left for 27 years and then had the opportunity to come back home 3 years ago, so just finished up my 3 years. Kelly's been back for 7. So she had left. Yeah, she had left for 8, so her county's a lot better. But just a little bit of things that we thought we would talk to you today about athletics. One, obviously, wanted to share with you just a little bit about our academics this past academic year, our athletic accolades, some things about facility projects, capital projects that we're working on, and then an academic integrity study that we had done through athletics, and then obviously leave it for some questions and answers. But in general, just about athletics last year from the academic summary. Last year we, as a department of our student athletes, roughly 500 student athletes total, we had a grade point average of a 3.15 for all student athletes in totality. The teams that we had above a 3.0, we had 14 of our 17 teams that had a 3.0 cumulative grade point average in totality out of 14 of the 17, and the highest team GPA is a 3.58, which was in rifle, which Kelly will talk a little bit about our academic success. As you all know, rifle continues to also perform very well nationally, but also they perform very well in the classroom, as you can see. From the NCAA standpoint, 2 scores, which they call the annual progress rate, is a 982 as a department overall. In general, we had 10 teams with a perfect score of 1,000. So we continue to push that among our coaches and student athletes, the importance of the classroom and what they need to do there, as also we look at in the athletic realm. Just a couple of other things from just an overall national perspective. We had 34 student athletes that became academic All-Americans, 123 academic All-Conference selections, and then 517 of our student athletes were in the Big 12 Commissioner's Honor Roll. And that 517 is from fall and spring combined total. So more than 50% of our student athletes are meeting the Big 12 Honor Roll. Among Power 5 institutions, which are 65 Power 5 institutions, West Virginia has the 4th most academic All-Americans since 2010. So we continue to climb that, and again, that's something that we're very proud of. From the individual accolades, the Elite 90 Award Elizabeth Gratz from Rifle was selected that award, and that's presented to the student athlete at the national championship with the highest GPA that's participating in that national championship. It's called Elite 90 because in all three divisions, divisions 1, 2, and 3, there's 90 NCAA championships, and each championship represents one individual, and Elizabeth was selected as the individual for Rifle as with the highest GPA and academic accolades. The Big 12 Scholarship Athletes of the Year, again, one student athlete is selected from each sport. Amelia Current from swimming had a 4.0 GPA in finance. Nate Adrian from men's basketball was selected as a Scholar Athlete of the Year in the Big 12 in sport management. And Jillian Forsey from cross country had roughly a 3.79 in exercise physiology. And then also last year, the 2017 Order of Augusta Award was also given to Amy Cashin, who's a track and cross-country student athlete as well from the university. So we're very proud of these individuals in these conference as well as national athletic awards. So I'll let Kelly talk a little bit about athletics.
Thank you. So last year, we're coming off of, in the world of athletics, what many term as a banner year for the world of college athletics. 6 teams finished ranked within the top 25. That included men's basketball, women's basketball, football, gymnastics, rifle, and women's soccer. You'll see throughout the world of competitive success, oftentimes you have people reporting on national statistics. And one that we were most proud of is that we were one of only 3 schools in the entire country that ended up in the top 25, along with 3 sports, men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. CBS Sports did a poll taking into consideration a number of success among those 3 high-profile sports, along with some Olympic programs, and they pegged us as 5th in the country for totality of success in athletics collectively amongst all Division I schools. Baseball, for the first time in 21 years, last year returned to postseason play, one that was celebrated largely among our department and specific to the baseball program. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit the baseball stadium, obviously that's a piece of that we believe played a role in us getting back to national prominence in that sport, and we celebrated after 21 years of not getting there in that. Men's basketball made it to the Sweet 16, lost a heartbreaker in California, but finished with a final ranking of 11th in the country. Women's basketball, if you followed their season at all, they actually had a bit of a rough one going into the Big 12 Conference Tournament, and then managed to pull off 3 upsets to bring home our first ever Big 12 Conference title. That was also their 2nd conference title in the history of our program. So extremely happy for them in the run that they had in the Big 12 tournament. They too finished with a final ranking of number 22 in the country. And football obviously was a big celebration for us last year, finishing off the year with a 10-win season and a final ranking of 18th in the country. To put that in perspective, as far as the 10 wins go within the regular season, it was our 125th year of playing football at West Virginia University, and only 9 times in 125 years had we capped off a total of 10 wins in a given season. So I think anybody who follows that program closely, and really any football team across the country, you know how exceptional that is to manage to pull off 10 wins in a given season. Continuing on to rifle, who brought home another national championship. You hear that often. They are our prized pupil, if you will, and a lot of accolades that come out of that program, both on the academic and athletic side of things. Also an Olympic gold medalist in Jenny Thrasher. I think probably everyone has either heard of or seen her or had the pleasure to know that young lady, and obviously her success from last year, which started with an Olympic gold medal. Women's soccer finished the year ranked number 2 in the country, also lost a heartbreaker in California. California was not good for us last year, so let's hope if we're headed back to the West Coast this year, we see better times. But they lost to Southern California in the final. That was their first ever College Cup appearance and made it to that final game. They had a whole host of young ladies that were very decorated on that squad, of which I'll note 2, Kadisha Buchanan, who took home the Herman Trophy Award. And for those of you who don't follow soccer, that's really the equivalent of the Heisman in football. It's an exceptional accolade for her, and she had a lot of other decorations through that, but was also an ESPY finalist last year and brought home a bronze medal with another young lady who was on our team, Ashley Lawrence, both who played for Team Canada. I'm going to turn it back to Shane. You may have heard the phrase that the road to championships is always under construction. And so speaking literally, we'll talk about some of our infrastructure.
Thanks, Kelly. Just a couple things that, we've continued to talk about and we'll continue talking about in the future is just facility upgrades within the athletic department. One is Milan Pushkar Stadium, which last year you saw the west side completed. This year you saw the east side, which is the press box side, completed. So really from a fan enhancement standpoint, the stadium is, taking big steps in the 30 years of the stadium being there, wider concourse, more restrooms, more concession stands. The wider concourses add to the fan ability to be able to move about the concourses in an easier manner. The same thing with the WVU Coliseum, facility that's now it's over 50 years old. Again, going in with some renovations there for the restrooms, concessions, the concourse area, and finishing that up last basketball season before conference play started. So what we're working on now is just more of a big, broader facility capital project campaign that we're looking at, or projects that we're going to look at in the big picture of what we need to see in the next 3, 5, 7, and 10 years and try to have that more structured and planned out. One of the things that we've looked at is the Olympic sport weight room, which we're very subpar when it comes to others in the Big 12 conferences or nationally in regard to their workout areas. And then just an athletic training room, again, for the Olympic sports, and then also looking at football, their athletic training room, which we are going to start a project there this winter, right after the football season, will be a new athletic training room for football that hasn't been updated for a number of years. So again, it's something that we'll roll out. We're working with architects now to give a vision where we need to head. I think Kelly spoke to it in talking in baseball, being a Power 5 institution, a member of the Big 12 Conference, really unlike the institution which we as an institution continue to recruit students. We continue to recruit student athletes, and part of that recruitment is what type of facilities can the coaches and student athletes work each and every day in and train in each and every day in. So that's something that will be on the forefront of my vision as I continue to lead this department. Lastly, I'll talk about academic integrity. Kelly was very involved in this, so it's something I think you'll be interested in.
The last time we spoke, about a year ago, we talked about an external review that was conducted by the compliance group. About every 3 to 4 years, we go through an external review of all things compliance, which is anything from, your monitoring to your academics to your extra benefits, all those nasty stories that sometimes crop up in the world of athletics. And so every 3 to 4 years, we bring in a group. That year, it happened to be the compliance group to just do a totality of review of the program to see if we have any deficiencies or anything that we can improve up on. What's been happening since then is obviously we've spent the past year with continued implementation of some of those recommendations. And within the recommendations, one of the things that was recommended by the external party is rather than having athletics being responsible for making sure that we met those recommendations and we're continuing to implement what they thought would be beneficial to us, they asked that a separate party have an opportunity to look at that as well. So we've worked closely with WVU's internal audit office and essentially turned that report over to help with some of the things as it was relative to the academic community. And a lot of that data and things that we were looking at, we needed assistance to do so. So the way that worked is the internal audits office met with a number of folks internally to athletics, some who were heavily involved in some of the reporting, and then developed, if you will, a series of analytics to look at our risk assessment. They looked at everything from course clustering to major clustering. Grade changes were a focal point, and an independent study, and targeted those 4 areas, understanding that sometimes across the country when you see issues, that's where they lie. And 2, those were focal points within the review that was conducted in 2016. So take, for example, course clustering, major clustering. They looked at a 20% guideline for that, and it essentially dug into all the course offerings and said, where do we have student athletes that are meeting or exceeding that 20% mark for course clustering? There was roughly 174 courses in which we exceeded enrollment or met that 20% figure. And then they started to drill down to all kinds of things that included what was the performance rate of student athletes to non-student athletes? Were there any type of trends? Were there grade changes? What was going on in that particular subset of courses to determine, quite honestly, if anything arose out of concern? Long story short, and as you can imagine, that's a lot of data and information. They really didn't have anything of significance in a concern for anything that they saw within course clustering or major clustering. They did, however, spend quite a bit of time on grade changes. And not to say that that was a problem for us or that there was a concern, but when they looked at the risk assessment of that, they thought grade change was probably at a greater risk to the institution than that of a course major or a course of choice by a student athlete. Obviously, there's a whole host of things that go into why you choose a major, why you take a class, but when it comes to a grade change, there's usually a series of things that cause that. And so they looked at grade changes amongst all of our student athletes for that year and determined that it was anywhere roughly, depending on a given term, 2 to 4%. As they compared that to the number of grade changes to the general student population, that too did not trigger any major concerns. But just to do due diligence, they then drilled down into particular courses to see could they find trends as it related to grade changes in particular courses where maybe that occurred more often than others. What were the reasons for those? And ultimately what came out of that, thank goodness, was nothing of significance or concern. We did, however, revisit what used to be somewhat of a procedure within athletics, that any time we had a grade change, our compliance office would then proactively go to that professor or department chair or whoever that was just to ask a series of questions and make sure there wasn't anything concerning as to why that grade change happened. Questions such as, was it offered to other students? Did anyone pressure you to make a grade change? Are you making the grade change in any way relative to the student athlete's eligibility? Those types of things. And so I share that with you because we did that previously. We ventured a little bit away from it with a change of quite honestly, staff and just personnel and their expectations. We're probably going back down that road. Sometimes, as you can imagine, to get a call from compliance or an email that's asking you questions about something that was done within your class, in your classroom, that might spark a concern, right? So I share that understanding that that's just standard for us. It's not intended at all to elude or think that someone's having a problem. Instead, it's just an opportunity for us to be able to be thorough and do our due diligence to make sure everything is okay. It also allows for a faculty member, in the event that they were pressured or had some concerns, to now have an outlet to voice that. Hopefully, we would never see that, and it would get to that opportunity, but this is that extra layer to open that up and create the comfort level for some dialogue. And then as it related to the area of independent study, they really didn't have any issues. I think we had less than a handful of student athletes that had ever gone through an independent study, an arrangement with that, and so there just was not anything there for them to really take a look at. Where this goes from here is we found this very helpful to us, as you can imagine. It was a lot of information, quite a bit of work on internal audits, so we're grateful for them for taking that on. But what was great about it was as they built the reports through the registrar's office, they're now there, right? So it's going to be much easier to continue to run those and pull the data moving forward. And so it makes it a lot easier for us to continue to monitor those things and make sure everything's going well. And with that, we'll open it up for some questions.
Are there any questions? Do you mind if I ask a question? I'll use this microphone. So during my chair report, you may remember I was talking about one of the policies we're revising is attendance policy. And so part of the attendance policy is it kind of tells faculty what expectations they have when a student is away on an official university event. And a lot of times it's an athlete who's away. And so I guess it would be helpful for us as we formulate our own policy to know, how you deal with the athletes and what you tell them in terms of, what expectations do the athletes have of the faculty, and then what do you tell them with respect to procedure?
So the main thing that we tell them is they need to communicate at the beginning of that course what their schedule conflicts are. In most cases, particularly with that of regular season or a potential postseason, they know what that looks like. And so that can happen by word of mouth and one-on-one with a professor. They're usually given a pamphlet and a form that outlines that so that you have it thereafter. And essentially, they're told that the expectation is go have a conversation with your professor and help them to understand what your conflicts are going to be. Postseason can sometimes be a question mark, but we try and look at it worst case scenario so that you're armed with the information immediately out the gate of knowing when he or she will not be present and when that's relative to the athletics. As far as what we tell them for the expectation is that we cannot guarantee them that there are going to be accommodations made for that. We hope to know that on the front end, and therefore we can work through it. When there are conflicts or issues, the biggest thing that we try to avoid, and as we've looked at this over the past, we aren't really dealing with student athletes who are struggling in courses, who otherwise can't make grades or being, a problem within their coursework and having these conflicts. Instead, we're dealing with young men and young women who are excelling and have very high GPAs and have career aspirations well beyond the playing field, but their sport happens to cause them some issues. So if you know anything about our track and cross country program, you know that you've got a group of young ladies that in totality perform at a very high level academically. They are oftentimes the ones who come in the most conflict with some of their courses. And so that's really the message that we have for our student athletes, and our expectation is that we carry that through to you also, that you know where they stand at the beginning of the term. Any other questions? Any questions from Potomac State or WVU Tech? Okay, no questions, thank you.
Okay, so for our next agenda item, Faculty Senate has an ombudsman, and you may not know what the ombudsman does, so we have our ombudsman here, Tom Patrick, to come spend a few minutes explaining what his office does. So, Tom.
Thank you for the invitation to come and chat with you. I've been 25 years on the law faculty and retired in December, and now I have a quarter-time appointment working as a faculty ombudsman. The focus is on faculty, although I work with students and work with staff as well, because those entities affect faculty lives occasionally. Larger universities that have had an ombuds office for a while may have one or two full-time folks in the ombuds office and handle university-wide conflict. But we're just starting, and so I'm building an office, and one of these years there may be full-time folks sitting in it. That may be after I've fully retired. I deal with lawsuits that folks find themselves involved in. I deal with grievances and disputes of various kinds. I deal with particular conflicts between particular individuals, but I most likely like to say that I deal with frustrations in the workplace. And I hope I can deal with frustrations. Sometimes folks have a frustration, but it's not serious enough to involve a third party, and of course, you know, it gets more serious and finds its way in folks polarizing themselves and being on opposite sides of things. So when there's a frustration, if I can deal with it early, that, it seems to me, is my most productive time with folks. It's an informal, non-adversarial process that I'm engaging. That's just the opposite of what we normally do. When we think of a fuss, when we think of conflict, normally we think adjudication. For example, someone's not meeting their expectations. We like to collect the facts about that and then adjudicate the matter by, say, putting a letter in the file saying, here's what you've done, and if you ever do that again, there'll be more consequences. That's an adjudication approach, and it's rather formal. My approach and Ombuds' approach nationwide is to deal informally with things. We deal confidentially with things as well. We keep confidences of the visitors that come by and chat until the visitor himself or herself would like to reveal those confidences in a more broad manner. It's independent. I report to the provost, but I'm not working for the provost to further the provost's agenda necessarily. Also, I'm not working for faculty members or for employees. I'm impartial. I like to say I'm on everyone's side. I like to say that I'm on the side of a healthy workplace and a opportunity for folks to treat folks fairly in the workplace and to find rhythms of working together. You know, we have a diversity among ourselves. My wife came out of a different family than I came out of, and when we got together, pretty soon the conflict spurred, not because one was right and one was wrong, but simply because my wife's family did things differently than my family did. And so we work through that in an impartial way. Something there is that doesn't love a productive conversation, that sends posturing or criticism or blame or threats under it and thwarts problem solving, results in a premature walk-off, makes gaps that are difficult even for the ablest of negotiators to close. Those in the humanities or English know I'm quoting Robert Frost, but I'm not talking about mending wall. I'm talking about the frustrations that sometimes erect walls in the workplace, and how can they be resolved. I think I can give you a little perspective on the way that we normally approach conflict. We normally avoid it. We don't say anything. We figure it'll get better. Sometimes it does. Lots of times it doesn't. Or on the other extreme, we confront conflict. And in the middle is the negotiation or a conversation. I say that we run very well. We're very skilled at that, you and I. We fight very well. We're very skilled at that. We don't talk very well. I find most of the folks that come into the office and talk about something, I find they've maybe never talked with their supervisor or with their colleagues about that. They engage in procrastination. Or I find that they just can't talk. Maybe they just haven't thought about the words that they could use because the words that's been used with them or the words that they use maybe cause greater conflict. Or maybe they're just maybe it's just unskilled in talking. Everything they say sounds like they want to avoid. Everything they say sounds like they want to fight. And those are the skills that we have. Of course, in the talking, there's lots of things. I love to say that I deal all the time with the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, but is the main consideration. If you think about adjudication for a moment, if you think about a determination of facts and a ruling, I'm not necessarily talking about going to court. A couple of kids come to mom with a dispute over something, and mom may take the evidence and make a ruling, or mom may help them work out the dispute on their own. But if you think about adjudication, you're thinking about the importance of rights, and people take positions on those rights, and you're thinking of the facts. And of course, if we thought about it for a moment, we could see that most things in our lives are not about facts, are not about rights either. They're mostly about values that we have or the interests that we have, the priorities that we develop, the perceptions that we develop, our needs, our values, those things are very important to us. And so I try to help people have conversations that they've never had or that they won't have or that maybe they're unskilled and can't have. Anything in the dispute that might be different than facts or the law. Certainly, the relationship of the disputants may be important, the interests of third parties. Maybe there's process concerns about whether this process is going to be fair or not. Maybe there's a respect. I had a conversation with a dean and a faculty member, and after 2 hours of conversation, the faculty member said, "I feel better now." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You've got everything resolved?" "Yes, everything is resolved." And I'm scratching my head trying to see what we produced. And I came away from that understanding that here was a person that wanted to be heard, hadn't felt like he'd been heard before, but in this conversation somehow was heard and was satisfied with being heard and understood, as opposed to getting a particular result that someone might want. Sometimes, of course, we're interested in vindication. Sometimes we're interested in inflicting suffering on the other folks that have inflicted suffering on us. That's all important. It may have to do with rights, may not have to do with facts, but it's something on the table. Maybe we're interested in conserving resources. Those are all things that are part and parcel to a dispute, but often we don't talk about them. So a visitor at my office would have an opportunity to think about those things. If you had a conflict or one of your colleagues has a conflict or a frustration, I could help by meeting with the individual to talk about options and see what things there may be that are of concern. I could maybe facilitate a meeting between important players, folks that may make decisions together, between individuals, between committees, between members of committees. I could work with workplace groups and help them discuss values, or I could train them in conflict resolution skills. I make presentations and workshops available to work groups that might like some additional skills in resolving the everyday conflict that comes across our desk. I've done some retreats with faculty groups and others. I can coach individuals of how to manage conflict, or, like I say, how to manage frustrations. I can maybe conduct a mediation. I provide training for conflict coaches and also train individual faculty members and staff members at the university to serve as neutral third parties in helping folks mediate a conflict. These are individual processes, they're informal processes developed to meet the needs of the particular visitors that come my way. So if you're experiencing frustration in the workplace, or you know someone who is, come visit. Chances are, after a good talk about it, we can find a resolution that's more satisfactory than what you have. I think I've expended the time that you allotted me on your agenda. I'll be happy to take any questions, or if you would like to send those over to me, it's tom.patrick@mayo. You know the rest.
Question from Roy.
Roy Nutter, Statler College. In the borough of one university, are you also available for West Virginia Tech and Potomac State?
Yes, I am. In fact, I've been over I've been to both of those places and worked with folks. One thing I forgot to say in the informality of my work, I'm not a mandatory reporter in the system of doing things. So if you have a case, let's say, of sexual harassment, for example, you'll have to take that to some other place for a formal adjudication, resolution of that. So by telling me and reporting to me and talking with me about it, does not put the university on notice that you have that kind of a claim. My role will be to help you resolve that informally. However, if you're interested in a more formal resolution in the initial meeting that I talk with you, I can tell you where you should report that.
Hi, Holly Montgomery Downs from Eberly College, and as a former member of the Faculty Welfare Committee, I was privy to more of the details, drilling down into the amazing work that you've been doing here for, is it 2 years?
Yeah, generally.
Okay.
I started before I retired, and I've kind of been working on developing the office and meeting with individuals. And before that, I was doing the faculty and staff mediation, so I'm familiar with those things.
Right, so on a really ongoing basis, and I realize we didn't have enough time here to allow you to share the breadth and depth of those details, but I just wanted to personally thank you for all the work that you've been doing. I think we've benefited as an institution tremendously, and the fact that we've got you in the office really shows, I think, very good things about interest in faculty and staff morale and welfare. So if there's anything you need to make your office to continue to flourish and succeed on an ongoing basis, I hope you'll let this group know.
I will do that. Thank you very much. Well, be in touch. I'll be happy to respond. You can come over and visit with me. I have an office now in Stansbury for those of you that are on the downtown campus, and of course, I still have my office at the law school for those out in this area. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Appreciate it.
you. And echoing Holly's sentiments, let's thank Tom for his work as ombudsman. And if you need more information, including contact information, there is a part of the Faculty Senate webpage devoted to the Office of the Ombudsman. Okay, so our next item is the Curriculum Committee report. Ralph, before he begins, you'll notice in the agenda that there are 4 approval items, which are annexes 1, 2, 3, and a new major in construction management. And so in the interest of time, what I'd like us to do is to consider all 4 approval items as one, which means Ralph will present all 4, and then I will take questions, objections, and points of discussion for any of the 4. If you need to pull individual items, courses, whatever, that would be the time to do it. And then when we vote, we'll vote on the whole bunch. Okay? So, Ralph.
So I have the combined motion of annexes 1, 2, and 3, as well as the new major in construction management for WVU Tech, with one modification. I'd like to pull from Annex 2, POLS 400, Political Science 400.
Okay. So with Political Science 400 pulled, are there any objections or points of discussions for annexes 1, 2, 3, or the new major in construction management? And Tech and Potomac State, you could chime in, letting us know if you have any questions. Okay. All right, so hearing no objections or points of discussion, we can vote. So all those in favor of annexes 1, 2, 3, and the new major in construction management, please say aye. And opposed, say no. Okay. Potomac State, how do you vote?
Potomac State votes 2 ayes.
Okay. And WVU Tech, how do you vote?
WVU Tech votes 3 ayes.
Okay, so the ayes have it. Annex 1, 2, 3, and the new major in construction management are approved. And the next item.
The next item is for information. It's the graduate programs report, and it's Annex 3A, and this in the minutes, or in the agenda.
And I'd like to thank Ralph for doing this. This is our first time, I think, that we've had a graduate program report. Okay. So this is just a for information item. And so are there any questions or points of discussion on this item, including at Tech and Potomac State? Okay, so hearing no questions, Annex 3A, the graduate programs report, is filed. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is the General Education Foundation Jeff Committee report. Now, Natalie St. Corcoran is not here today, so filling in for her is Rob Brock. And here we just have one approval item, so Rob.
Just one approval item. Annex 4 for approval, 2 courses.
These are Jeff deletions. And this is a for approval item.
Yep.
First of all, are there any objections or points of discussion regarding Annex 4? Tech and Potomac State, any questions? Okay. Hearing none, then all of those in favor of approving Annex 4 certify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Potomac State, how do you vote?
Potomac State, 2 ayes.
Okay. WVU Tech, how do you vote?
WVU Tech has 3 ayes.
Okay. Then Annex 4 is approved. Next item.
Is just for information. It's the transition review. We have 1 course that's Annex 5.
Okay, so Annex 5, Jeff transition review, and this is a for information item. So are there any questions, objections, or points of discussion, including Tech and Potomac State? Okay, so hearing none, Annex 5, Jeff transition review is filed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, our next item is Roy Nutter, report from Faculty Senate, Faculty Representative to State Government.
Roy Nutter, Statler College, and your ACF representative. Just a quick look at the last month. I attended the Community and Technical College Council meeting in Beckley and the ACF meeting. Community and Technical College group, in case you don't know, is what we call the 2-year schools. And I kind of keep my eye on them just so we know what's going on. I found it interesting, and I think you probably should know, that meeting, there's 13 members of what I call CTC, Community and Technical College Council, kind of like HEPC governs four-year schools now, except for Marshall and WVU, but the two-year school council is that one. 13 members, they had 3 show up at the meeting. I wondered what was happening with that. Just piece of information that there seems to be some serious disorganization or lack of attention going on there. Second thing is ACF meeting, and in general, most of that was about the budget, as I've said many times, that the two-year schools probably are hurting worse than the four-year schools in some cases. They are truly groaning on budget. This coming week, or I guess it's this week, I will go to the HEPC meeting and another ACF meeting. So I should have another report for you in December. Concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Roy? Okay. So the next item is Board of Governors report. Normally Stan Heilman gives this report, but he's away for a conference, so I'm giving the report. The board met on October 27th with committee meetings the day before, and the outcome of the meeting was the following items. First of all, we approved the new winter term, and the way that works, it's going to run December 14th to January 4th. It's entirely online, and the cost is $349 per credit hour, no matter whether you're in state or out of state. And as John reported, we have 288 enrollments so far. And so assuming those are mostly 3-hour classes, or some couple 1-hour classes, but it does provide an additional source of revenue for the university. With respect to rulemaking, there were some new Board of Governor policies related to administration that have sort of been ported over to rules. And so there's a notice of rulemaking. There's a public period of comment open right now. These are mostly rules on administration. They included the rules on sexual misconduct that would be related to Title IX and also children on campus. And there's also a new rule I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of, and that is there is now a procedure in place for providing emeritus status to staff. Much like faculty can become emeritus now, staff can be emeritus. So the actual procedure for doing it is under development by the staff council. So the basic requirements are the staff member would have to be here for at least 15 years, and it would require approval. So there will be a process, much like if you're going up for emeritus status as a faculty member, it needs to be vetted, and then it also needs to get final review and approval by the president, just like a emeritus faculty member would. The other thing is we had our audit report, and we got a clean bill of health from our external auditors, Clifton Larson, and they concluded that we are in a stable fiscal position. So that's the end of my Board of Governors report. I don't know if anyone had any questions. Yes. The point of staff emeritus, it's really just kind of retention. If you're here for 15 years, you would then be eligible. I don't think there's really going to be a cost involved, so just kind of a morale thing, recognition, you know. One question that comes up is parking. So if you're faculty emeritus, one of the perks is you can get on-campus parking, but only if you need it, and that would be if you're still working with grad students. So the presumption there is staff would typically maybe not have the need to park. So we wouldn't have to provide them with that benefit. There's a few other benefits. They can get it. I think you could get a discount on athletic events and things like that. But there's no significant cost, and it would maybe help with morale and retention. Any other questions? Okay. Next item is new business. Is there any new business? In Tech and Potomac State, if you have new business, just flash up the no questions. Okay. All right, finally, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, second? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.